In our videos, we talk a lot about how tough MMA is. But if you want to see what is real MMA, you need to sit next to a disappointed fighter who has just been beaten up and see how he copes with the hardest and saddest moments in his life. The trilogy of Velasquez and Dos Santos is one of the greatest in the history of heavyweight. It differs from all the confrontations in UFC by mutual respect and the absence of trash talk. Each of the fighters had their own great moments. In the first fight, Junior took out the undefeated champion in just a minute, but in the rematch, Kane, in his trademark style, put Dos Santos for 25 minutes without stopping. Despite the total D-class, Junior commanded respect for his resilience. No one could have withstood such a beating, but the audience in Vegas thought otherwise. Dos Santos, all beaten up and no longer looking like himself, congratulated the new champion and said that Kane was better that evening. But we can see that despite the smile, sadness and annoyance were visible in his eyes. For some reason, the audience started booing the former champion, to which he replied,
"Why are you guys doing that? Why?"
These words still break our heart. A man who gave his all and sacrificed his health for the sake of the people was booed by them. But commentator Joe Rogan decided to cheer up the fighter.
Fight his heart out, ladies and gentlemen. How about some love for Junior Dos Santos?
Alexander Gustafsson's fight against Anthony Smith was in Alex's homeland in Sweden. In a difficult fight, Gus lost to the young prospect by submission, and it seems that this was the last straw for Alexander, after which he began to take off his gloves.
Now I'm very disappointed, it happened again. I lost in my own home. But you know what, it's a sport. You do it because you love it, and Lionheart, Anthony Smith here is a beast, man. I just want to thank you all for coming out there tonight. And yeah, what can I say? The show is over, guys.
After this defeat, Gustafsson will decide to return, but as this fight will show, it would be better if he really ended his career at that very moment. As we know, becoming a champion is the main goal of every fighter. If you want to get a gold belt, you need to sacrifice sweat and blood. But sometimes that's not enough. I mean, literally. The fight of Penn against Joe Stevenson is a great example of this. BJ has done so many terrible things to Joe that Tony Ferguson himself would be envious. Footage from this fight is forbidden to be shown on most sites. Even the official channel of the UFC demonstrates it in black and white. But we don't need a fight. Just one photo after the fight where Joe Stevenson is lying with tears in his eyes in a pool of his own blood is enough. Penn cut him up, washed him with his own blood and choked him in front of a huge audience. This photo makes it clear how painful a defeat can be. After this fight, Joe fell into depression and had serious problems with alcohol. Fedor Emelianenko is a true legend of the sport. No one has been able to beat his huge streak of victory so far, but everyone remembers how he lost 3 times in a row and his career was immediately buried. No surprise that Fedor didn't give up. It was difficult, but he arranged a new streak of victories. He won 5 times in a row and was signed to Bellator. It seemed that suddenly old Fedor had returned, or at least a part of him. Matt Mitrione was put up against him. Not the champion caliber fighter whom Emelianenko would easily beat in all times. In addition, Mitrione was a UFC fighter who had recently left the company, so Fedor really needed this victory. The fight ended very quickly. Both fighters struck, both fell, but Mitrione was able to get up, and Fedor didn't. It's a really sad moment. In this fight, the last hopes that we can still see the same Fedor died. Each of his defeats is painfully unpleasant, but this one was especially tough. On our channel, we talked about the Aldo-McGregor fight more than once. We analyzed the knockout technique and how it affected Conor's career. On the one hand, we have a wonderful victory for McGregor, but there is also an incredibly dark and sad side of Jose Aldo. Being undefeated for 10 years, #1 outside the weight categories, Aldo has repeatedly said that he is ready to lose to anyone but Conor. You already know the outcome. 10 years of hard work collapsed in just 13 seconds. When Jose woke up after the knockout, his main nightmare turned into reality. The King of Rio could not hold back his tears. Hiding his face behind his t-shirt, he went to the locker room where he couldn't contain his bitterness from the defeat. The realization of what Aldo had lost and in what manner even came to McGregor when he said after the fight.
Honestly, I feel for Jose. He's a phenomenal champion. He was a phenomenal champion. We deserved to go a little bit longer.
Unfortunately, the greatest featherweight didn't even get a rematch for his title, and those 13 seconds forever blackened his incredible career. BJ has already been in our top as a man who brought a fighter to tears, but this time he will bring you to tears. Unfortunately, Penn's legacy has deteriorated due to his streak of defeats. But it's enough to know one thing. If there was no BJ Penn, we would never get McGregor, Khabib, Ferguson, and, in general, everyone who fights welterweight and lighter weight classes. The born featherweight managed to fight even in heavyweight. His character and fearlessness aroused everyone's interest, and his skills in the cage made him a real favorite of the public. But after the champion in 2 weight classes lost twice to Frankie Edgar and unsuccessfully returned to welterweight, he decided to end his career. He didn't have enough patience for a long time. After a couple of years, he came back and asked for a 3rd fight with Frankie. Now, in featherweight, unfortunately, this fight wasn't even competitive. Edgar just destroyed him. But what hit the fans' emotions happened at the post-fight conference.
Dana gave me an opportunity to work with the UFC gyms and do different things, so you know I can continue to feed myself over, you know.
He's one of the best 155 pounders of all time. He built that weight class. He built that weight class, and he was responsible for helping build the UFC. That's his legacy.
Going back to the reign of Fedor Emelianenko, we saw a real beating of Mark Coleman, who was beaten in the striking, was beaten on the ground, and was finished with a painful submission. But all this time, there were Coleman's daughters in the hall, and they were even more upset by his defeat than their father. It was a truly brutal fight to be watched by little girls, especially considering that their father participated in it, so it's not surprising that we have them in this top.
Game feels great. No, it's okay. It's okay, babies.
At the UFC 242, Dagestani Khabib Nurmagomedov faced American Dustin Poirier. Some people counted on Poirier's victory due to the fact that he lost almost all the most important fights in his career. Every time Poirier rises to the top and gets close to the title, he loses and rolls back again. Dustin himself is one of the nicest guys in the UFC, treats everyone with respect. He is engaged in charity and attracts others to it. So many were rooting for him. Dustin was already preparing for his fight as an interim championship and did everything to defeat the Dagestani. Unfortunately, everything that Poirier had just wasn't enough to defeat Khabib. He immediately began to take him down and beat him. Dustin showed a couple of excellent sweeps, kept on well and didn't take much damage, but still lost. Although he had great moments in the battle when he shook Khabib and took him to the guillotine, but he didn't close the guard and Khabib used it to choke Poirier.
It seems like you got him with a couple of good shots in the second round, and then that guillotine seemed pretty deep. How close did you feel you were in those two moments?
The guillotine was really deep, but for the rest of my life, I'm gonna look back and wonder why I didn't jump full guard with it. I just threw one leg over so he couldn't pass. I'm pretty sure with my gloves and his shirt, we'll raise enough money to build the water tower in Uganda for the pygmy people and, you know, get the orphanage and that school back on track. They had a bad flood that ruined their water system and supply. And that's just now what I'm trying to do, you know. I get out the cage and I'm go to the next fight, and I really want to complete that mission. That's important to me.
Listen, I just want to say this from a lot of people in the UK that have fallen in love with you this week, mate. You've been a gentleman with us. You've carried yourself with such tremendous dignity. You fight like an absolute warrior, and what you're doing outside of the octagon as well in the world of charity is something you should be extremely proud of. Get home, go and see your family, and
We all remember Chael Sonnen as a very sharp-tongued fighter who never gave up his statements. Even when he lost, he said in response that he was still invincible and indisputable. It would seem impossible to touch him. Mentally, he was bulletproof, but it was an image that cracked twice. For the first time, it was after the fight with Silva.
It's devastating. I can't sugarcoat it. My heart's broken. I came in with a silver medal. I wrestled for a world championship. I came in second. I fought in the WEC for a world championship. I came in second. Now I fought in the UFC. And again, I'm a runner-up, and it hurts really bad.
The second case occurred years later, when he lost to Machida and announced after the fight that he's retiring. If in the cage he gave, as always, a confident interview, then in the interview with Ariel Helwani, Chael opened up like never before.
In your mind going into this fight, did you tell yourself if you didn't win that you were going to retire?
No. I fully thought I was going to win this fight. I was going to call out Ryan Bader. I had the whole thing ready. But, you know, I really do. I dug deep. I've had a hard life. You know, I worked really hard my whole life for a lot of goals.
So how did you make that decision? What was going on in your mind when you decided to take off the gloves and do that?
Well, I was on a bit of a championship run. If I beat Lyoto tonight, I'd have fought Bader for the world championship. And that was the only reason I was in this sport, you know. I promised my father you know, I was just in the sport.
Do you leave with any regrets?
No. I loved every minute.
And what a great honor for you. You retire undefeated and undisputed.
Undefeated and undisputed. 3 different weight classes. The greatest fighter the sport has ever seen.
People say the eyes are the mirror of the soul. Sonnen's tear-filled eyes perfectly conveyed his emotions about the promise to his father. This situation occurred when Max Holloway decided to go up to lightweight and fight for the second title against Dustin Poirier. In a fairly close fight, Poirier won, but the whole sadness of this situation was that Max Holloway's little son saw his father getting defeated for the first time, and he sincerely couldn't believe it. He shouted to his dad to get up, but Max couldn't do anything in this fight.
You gotta get up.
After the fight, Holloway was defeated, but he held on well, not showing his complete disappointment. At the same time, his son was crying, and even the legend Shaquille O'Neal came to comfort the boy.
Hey, your dad's a champion, brother. All right, Rush? Your dad's fine, he's good.